I'm deeply grateful to Dr. Dorothy Fields and to Ms. Arva Parks, who is caught in traffic herself, but will be here soon. I'm very grateful to them, first for making this marvelous film, and then for agreeing to come and talk to us tonight about their experiences. It's an event that I've been looking forward to for months with great anticipation and joy, and I'm deeply appreciative of your willingness to join us. And now I would like to ask the President of the Black Student Union, Jerron Johnson, to come up and introduce the film to us. Thank you again for attending and for your support.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerron Johnson. As Dr. Gillespie has said, I'm President of the Black Student Union. On this campus, we have three main goals that we attribute to the FIU community. Number one is academic empowerment. We want to make sure that the students at FIU, that they are academically empowered, not wasting their money, their parents' money, or the money of the government, because we know that degree is the most important thing that they need to get. Number two is community service. We want to make sure that students are well aware that somebody did influence them in college, whether it was their family, a friend, or a stranger on the street just saying that you can be better than me. We want to make sure that students give back to the community one way or another. And number three, we do have cultural and social events to make sure that we have well-rounded students at FIU, not only ones that go to class, but ones that are well prepared for the world, that are well prepared and know what's going on in Miami and in Florida and in the nation. What I'm here to introduce to you today is Parallel Lives. Parallel Lives tells the story of two women, Ms. Dorothy Fields and Ms. Arthur Moore Parks, who grew up in Miami experiencing the city, its history, and culture in vastly different perspectives. This documentary shows how their lives, although different, were brought together over a common interest in Miami's history. For those BSU members that are wondering, like, when is this meeting going to start? Our meeting starts immediately after this event, so please bear with us, and I hope you guys enjoy the documentary. Thank you.
Every time I watch this film, and this is the third time, I'm more moved by it and deeply grateful to Ms. Parks and to Dr. Fields for this marvelous gift that they give to each of us as we watch the film. We are, I think, very fortunate that they are here tonight to talk a little bit more about it, and to introduce them, I'd like Stephanie from the Black Student Union to come forward.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Leonora, and I am the treasurer of BSU. I would now like to introduce the stars of this documentary, Ms. Dorothy Fields and Arva Moore Parks.
Let me just ask if either of you would like to say anything before we begin the Q&A, or if you'd just like to get into that.
I'm glad you got here. I was concerned.
I was caught in the storm coming from east to west.
Or Miami.
Yeah. I just do that this kind of year. So.
Yeah. Well, we're delighted to be here and to see such a wonderful crowd in this inclement weather. And maybe they have questions for us. I don't know. Sure.
I don't remember any opposition. It was just, we became friends and we started hanging out together and going places together. And, I think it was just very natural. And I think that goes back to the point you just made, that if you deal with people one-on-one, friend to friend, it's a very simple way.
And because we shared a passion, our lives touched more than perhaps they would have otherwise, because we were both seeking information about our communities, and in doing so we got to work together on many levels over 35 years.
Well, I think the key thing is getting to know each other, and when you live in a segregated society like Dottie and I started in our lives, you don't have that opportunity. There is opportunity now, but sometimes I still people in their archives, right? Add to that?
Yes. many times, well, I guess maybe in the magnet schools now, there are opportunities, again, because of common interest. I talked about passion before. Interest and passion, if you're looking for the same kinds of things, it always helps. And just being neighbors. There were times when, of course, because of law and custom, blacks were not allowed to live or rent outside of certain areas. And as a result, there were blacks who had large, beautiful homes right next to blacks who had shotgun homes that may have still been beautiful and clean, but they were certainly of a different size. And now, of course, you can live wherever your green carries you. And so that in itself is still limiting, because in many of our grocery stores, you can smell the rotten meat before you get to the inside. You get to the door and you can smell the meat. It's already rotting. One chain in particular, I guess about 3 or 4 years ago, did a makeover with all of their stores. And when they got to 12th Avenue and 54th Street, we were wondering if they were going to do it. Winn-Dixie. And they did it. It was marvelous. And so they're all now pretty much the same. Of course, the mom and pop stores are all struggling, and so they still have their problems. But getting to know each other through work, through interest, through tragedy, however it happens, you get to know that this individual has the same kind of experiences as a human being as I have. We grew up as mothers, we grew up as divorcees, we grew up as daughters losing parents. Those are the kinds of experiences where we bonded together. She remarried, but raise your hand, Bob. I haven't found a Bob. That Bob. Oh boy.
I think the other thing is that, and I remember early on, and this is, if you didn't grow up in a segregated area, then it's hard to relate to this. And I'm speaking of growing up in the white neighborhood. I'm not sure we knew that there were people like Dorothy in the black neighborhood. The blacks, people that we interacted with in the traditional way were often people that worked in our home or that we knew in some capacity like that. And I know in the very early part of our friendship, it was very important for Dorothy to help me understand how much alike we were. That we were middle-class families, and all her relatives, my goodness, she looks like who's who of education. But that was important, and that was a learning experience for me, because I'd never had that experience. I never went to school in my whole, until graduate school, with someone who was not white. So that's kind of shocking today, and I think it's important for people to know how much we've changed, even though I agree completely, I know Dottie does too, we still got a long, long way to go.
But see, my grandmother was a washerwoman, so she could have worked for your family. My grandfather worked for the Budges, a prominent white family in Miami. He worked for William Jennings Bryan, who ran for president of the United States. I mean, my grandfather was a handyman, kind of. And my grandmother certainly was a washerwoman. And so it was from that kind of background, but because my grandmother in particular was so determined that all of her children would finish high school and college. So when I was born, New Year's Eve, that was my birthday that they gave. When I was born, New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1942. Count your
She let
fingers.
you know.
Count your fingers. And she's older by a minute or two. Not much. My mother, her 2 sisters, and 4 brothers were all college graduates. One of them, a medical doctor, had already became a radiologist because once he finished medical school and went to the hospital to Jackson, it was then City Hospital, they wouldn't let him read the x-rays for his patients, and so he became very discouraged and decided to close his office and go to Cook County Hospital in Chicago and become a fellow in radiology. And so when I was born, he was already a radiologist with his own building in Colortown, Overtown. Another one was in family practice right around the corner. He later became one of the first blacks at Mount Sinai. And they had a luncheon for him, I guess about 3 or 4 years ago. And he celebrated his 100th birthday last October. When I talked with him last week and I was saying, "You're 100, he said, "Oh, no, I'm 100 3/4. So I guess when you get that age, you're like children. And you start counting all the months. And then they all started off as teachers. But again, they came from the background of being a washerwoman and a handyman. And so it's the dichotomy of it all as it comes together. We are all human beings. We're all people with, as women, the same challenges, and as men, the same challenges, trying to do our best, hopefully, for the world, and trying to pay less than $4 a gallon for gas.
I think too, one of the commonalities talking about our family that we did learn is that I also came from a family where education was so important. I mean, you didn't, it wasn't where you were going to go to, it wasn't, if you were going to go to college, it was where you were going to go to college.
And have you...
Are you ready? Have you studied? Are you ready to go? So that was a commonality, but I had never known anyone like Dottie. I never had that opportunity. I feel like it was misfortune for me that it took me that long. On the other hand, in the movie The Help Now and everything is out there, I did have some very close relationships with the people that did work at my family. I was taught to love Jackie Robinson before a lot of people at Horace Mann Junior High because of the lady that was at my house and very much a part of my life. When we came out here tonight, I was telling my husband that I used to go cane pole fishing with somebody else that worked in my family, with my brother and I, which was a marvelous experience of someone like me to have. Used to catch garfish right out there in the canal, and this was all Everglades. But it's different when you meet a peer. They were peers, but they weren't educational peers. I mean, they were treated. They were not the people that worked in my family because of my father's belief in all of the things. Were not treated, but they did work for us, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But they were not treated like somebody you didn't pay attention to. In fact, I remember my father got in trouble at the same first wedding we were talking about because the lady, Willie Lee, that worked for us, she came and sat with the family. And that was pretty shocking at that point in time. She didn't wear a uniform. She wore a pretty outfit and sat right down with us. So I had a little bit of that kind of background that was unusual, actually, for my generation. But certainly it was totally segregated.
Did you ever consider yourselves being ahead of your time? Because your relationship is totally was not the norm in those days. So did you consider yourself doing something specific or just natural or the circumstances? Or?
Well, there were others. Recently I've been thinking about that. And there were white women, especially at the Methodist Church, and Uncle John told me there were 2 churches, and one was liberal and the other one was not. But there were other instances, not many, but there were other instances where black and white women work together on things. The Friendship Garden and Civic Club, Mrs. Annie M. Coleman, a black woman, worked with the women at the Miami Women's Club, although they were not equals. You see, it was the Miami Women's Club assisting the black people who needed help, as opposed to them working together. But they made progress, and so that's what was important. The closest parallel that I can think of would be Dr. Ruth Greenfield and Mrs. Dorothy Wallace Graham. Ruth Greenfield, a white woman who came to Miami in the 40s, started a conservatory in Overtown for the performing arts. And she would bring professors and students from the University of Miami to Colortown, to the Sir John Hotel and the Mary Elizabeth, where we would have classes. And I was supposed to become a cellist. But when I heard that the corns would come around my fingers, I was looking for an excuse. I decided that I didn't want that because I wanted to have nice cornless fingers. But Dorothy Wallace Graham and Ruth Greenfield, who are going to be honored at the Lyric Theaters coming up sometime soon, have been friends now for, I guess, about 70 years. That's a long time. Yes, that's us. And they're in their 90s now, but still active, but very involved with the arts. And again, Ruth Greenfield started the conservatory and moved it from Colortown, Overtown to Colortown, Liberty City. Dorothy Graham has 2 sons, and one of them now is a county court judge, Judge Wendell Graham. And he played violin, and there are many of us who were part of that conservatory. And there may have been others, again, through interest, through a shared passion, through shared challenges. You get to know someone, and many times friendships develop. It's a county, first of all, it's a county building, and of course, he who has the goal makes the rules. So the county owns the building. I've been called in on a consultation several times on that. And of course, with the economy the way it is, it's difficult to get funding for anything. And at one point, the church wanted to buy it so that they could expand the church. Do you know about that?
Yes.
Oh, yes. So it's a challenge. I would encourage you to continue asking and talking and working to see what can be done. There was someone who was working very hard with that. What was the woman's name? And she has a lot of pictures and a lot of things that need to be preserved. And I'd like to talk with you afterwards because, you know, at the Black Archives, we'd like to be able to help if we can, and especially to preserve those materials. If not in that location, certainly in another location, but they need to be preserved. And so I'll see you afterwards. Okay.
I was going to say too, when it comes to preservation, if you can figure out a really good use for the building, one thing we both learned in preservation, you can't just make everything a historic site. If you can find a really good use for it, that's your best shot. One of the things I also say is that once you succeed, people don't say we should have torn it down. You know, it's hard to save it sometimes, but I've never had someone say should have torn it down. So find a use.
An adaptive reuse that generates income. It's got to be self-sustaining. Yeah. That's the hard part.
That's the hard part.
Yes, but not impossible. You're young. You've got lots of ideas. Yes, well, Virginia Key Beach certainly is an important site. The city owns it. He who has the goal makes the rules. And while they have had very dedicated and committed Virginia Key Trust and advisory board, they're still advisors. and the city has its own agenda for that. The community is still working with the city to try to come to some compromise so that it can again be useful to the entire community.
But again, having grown up in a segregated Miami, I think that's a very important site
Yes.
in which to tell the story, because I can remember very well when it was a segregated beach and when it stopped being a segregated beach. But the story's there, and it was even a beach where runaway slaves were rescued from that beach. So there's quite a story, and the Seminoles and all that is mixed up in the area of Virginia Beach. And the Seminoles were rescued. It's kind of an area of rescue, and I think that's an important story to tell. You have to tell people why it's important sometimes. You can't just assume they know.
Yes.
Well, this has been a wonderful evening from the documentary and having the opportunity to elaborate on that, because the wonderful experiences that you very generously shared with us. I hope you'll join with me now and offer one final thanks to our distinguished guests for this evening. And thank you all again for coming.